All right, welcome. We're glad you're here. My name is Eric White. I'm the Adult Services Librarian here at the library. As you may know, our January theme at the library is Colorado 150, exploring our legacy, commemorating the sesquicentennial of our state. Throughout the month, we are holding talks, discussions, and events related to the history of this land that we call home. In that vein, we are excited to have Ute Mountain Ute Elder and historian Donald Whyte to share a Ute perspective on history. Before we do formal introductions, I'll mention my standard disclaimer, which is that the library sees part of its job as bringing in speakers to share their own perspective for the enrichment of our community. Speakers' perspectives are purely their own. All right, so now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Donald Whyte grew up on the Ute Mountain Ute Reservation in southwest Colorado and attended public school just off the reservation. Later, he attended college and found a seasonal position as a wildland firefighter with the federal government. This led to a 27-year career working for the National Park Service as a park ranger in the law enforcement part. During his journey, Donald completed his paid position as chief ranger at Chaco Culture National Historical Park. His other duty stations included Mesa Verde, Hovenweep, I hope I get some of these names right, Saguaro, Haleakala.
Close enough.
Close enough. Okay. Yellowstone and Rocky Mountain National Park. He currently lives in the Denver metro area. And before I formally welcome him, I'm going to get this presentation going. So bear with me for just a second. I'll share a screen so that our online audience can see what we're seeing. All right, there we go. Please welcome Donald Whyte.
All right. Good evening, everybody. As you guys see the table here, I have a couple little critters. They're important to me and to Ute culture because the bear gives us a social ceremony called the bear dance. The bear dance is held when the people are coming out of wintertime and heading towards summer. The bear dance is held in many places across the Ute homeland. And what we're going to step into is what I believe the Ute homeland was prior to 1870. So you're going to see some maps, and we'll talk about that because it is a different perspective as we look at what America is going to be celebrating the 250th and 150th anniversaries of this country and this state. However, I hear among my tribal friends, it can only be a day of remembrance. And I think if you have any opportunity to learn about tribal histories, indigenous nations, you'll find that we've gone through a transition of trauma. And we could use all the words that are associated that deal with this horrible event that has been going on for 500 years. And now we're at a point of looking at things, but we now have a different perspective in how we are going to go forward. So that's why I'm here, is to add to the perspective of some of the history and also some of the things that I think are important that we understand, that we can learn. Like Eric said, my career has taken me into the modern world or today's world, but in another sense, it gave me an opportunity to protect Indian country from a tribal sense. Because remember, all of this land, for thousands of years, we lived upon it, we followed the various cycles, we migrated, we learned about the plants, the animals, and we harvested and utilized those resources and developed our own cultures. The words that I grew up and heard in high school was savage, wagon burner, spear chucker, prairie dog eater, chief. Those were words that I grew up with when I was coming up in the system that where I now participate today. Ute, or in our word, nooch. The I is actually silent, but I didn't have the phonetic keys to be able to write it out in the Southern Ute fashion. And that's the other thing we're going to talk about here is that there are 3 Ute tribes, and we'll go through that as we move forward. But I didn't quite do it in my graphic, but underneath the word Ute, it says 3 worlds. And that's where I will head to next, because everybody recognize that hat? Everybody recognize that eagle feather? That is my world that I've grown up with. I come from 2 tribes. You may not hear it from other people, but I had to figure out how to live in the modern world, come from a tribal perspective and a reservation. And as you look at those, imagine 2 circles. At times, they can be far apart from each other. And other times, they can be right in line and you only see 1 circle. But when they are far apart, I'm somewhere in between. And if you listen to tribal people, they will say, I come from 2 worlds. And sometimes they get into trouble, things like alcoholism, diabetes, other things that seem to not work out well, and they stay in these 2 worlds. Well, I, as growing up, looked at that and saw some issues with that. And so I had to come up with my own way to be successful. I created a 3rd circle, or my world. So I've got 3. So you can imagine, as you visualize this, 3 hoops, 3 circles. Again, like I said before, sometimes they're all together and all you see is 1 big circle. Other times, you may see 1 circle just touching the border of 1, and the other one is by itself. Sometimes you will see them all equally crossing over, so it forms a very unique pattern. That's when things are going good in all the 3 worlds that I live in. And then there are other times where all of them are nowhere near each other. And you have to say, where am I at? Well, I'm not going to be in these other 2 worlds that you hear us talk about. I'm in my world. And this is where I step into what I would call the land. You will hear tribal people always talk, we are of the land. That is who we are. Because I worked for the Park Service, I had many opportunities. Hawaii, Alaska, Arizona, California, Colorado, Wyoming, New Mexico, pretty much the western US where there are national park areas, to be able to be out there in what we call America's treasures, the best idea from an American perspective. Well, from a Ute perspective in myself, this is Ute country where I've traveled. But it's also, among other tribal people, it's called Turtle Island. And we live with those ideas that we come up with. And as we're growing up, we learned that we have been living here since the Pleistocene period, 11,500 years ago. We may not have been the Utes, but we were the people. But then lo and behold, in the last decade, White Sands National Park. Everybody familiar with White Sands? They all know it's in New Mexico. Some people out there, the employees and the archaeologists, and they were out there doing their work, preserving the cultural and natural historical resources, and they came across some footprints. Are you guys all familiar mostly of the Ice Age footprints that were found there? And they went through rigorous testing. Rigorous, because if somebody's going to come out and make a claim, and the Park Service has done the best job, I believe, to try and get the best information available to make statements. Turns out those footprints are 23,000 years old. Imagine, again, I'm asking you to visualize. Tribal people talk about time immemorial. In the various institutions of learning, we were told we were only here about 11,500 years where we came across the land bridge. That's what we were taught. That's what I learned. But all of a sudden, White Sands, with their discovery and their analysis and their conclusion, just doubled that time from 11,500 years to 23,000 years ago. That's a period of time that, oh my goodness, that is significant. And the tribal people are looking and trying to understand that, because among the Blackfeet up to the north, they recently, with their DNA analysis, were able to conclude and say, yes, we know we have been in our area 18,000 years. That's an important statement from a tribal perspective. 23,000 years? Let's look at that. Up in a Discovery Center here in Moraine Park, everybody's probably spent some time wandering through. There is a interpretive area that talks about that 11,500 years. And somebody in the Park Service did the math, and they said that is equivalent to 600 generations. It's right there. You can go up there and see it yourself. When it opens up, go up and look at that, and you go, oh my, 600 generations. We as Americans, and I'm a part of you guys because I'm part of this modern world. I dress, health insurance or retirement, everything. I mean, all of this, I am American. But that tribal side, 600 generations. That's for 11,500 years ago. 23,000 years. Is it 1,200 generations now that we've been living and occupying the landscape? So when a Ute like myself says, I am from the land, yes, I am from the land. Because we know in public meetings today, what is it like when you get in a big meeting to discuss an issue and somebody stands up and they look to the audience and they look to the people who are leading the meeting and say, my family has been here 5 generations. Everybody affords them the respect because they've been here a long time in their standards and their time frame. What would happen if I stood up and said, my people have been here 1,200 generations? I'm not boasting. I'm just saying it's a perspective. My 2 worlds and my world, 3 worlds. If you look at the Park Service hat, you'll see up there on top of the crown 4 indentations. I knew a Navajo friend of mine who talked about the 4 worlds and talked about how the world is circular and how the Park Service has that tribal stuff within them also because of the symbolism that it represents. This eagle feather, I earned this only recently because I started to go back and learn my language. On the Southern Ute Indian Reservation, they started a language program, working with Fort Lewis College to be able to teach individuals who wanted to learn to speak their language because they were looking for teachers because our language is fading away. Currently, in the 3 reservations, the Northern Utes, the Southern Utes, and the Ute Mountain Utes, word was at the time when I was going through this training, we only have 30 fluent Ute speakers remaining. And that was 3 years ago. I know some have walked on or moved on or gone to the spirit world. So we're quietly losing that. But we have been aware of that since the 1970s, at least with the Southern Utes and the program I took. It took the Tribal Council time to pass a resolution in 1974 with the chairman named Leonard Birch and the council to say, we need to focus on our language. And it took a while to be able to bring that language in an academic form, because as the fluent speakers wanted to teach their students or their kids, they were in school. But the state of Colorado said, we will not allow any person who is not certified in a teaching certificate program to come into our schools. So the Southern Ute tribe, even though they had stuff going on the reservation, they had their students in public schools, they had to find a way, and that's where they teamed up with Fort Lewis College. And they created this certificate program, which I'm now a part of. I grew up on my reservation not learning my language. And that was a choice by my parents, because they did not want us as kids to go to the boarding schools that were in Phoenix, Utah, California, Oklahoma. They wanted us to stay close to home. So that's why I stayed in public schools there in Cortez. Ute was not taught at that level. I could hear the Ute language when my relatives would come over to the house to get coffee early in the morning, hearing those sounds, wondering what they were saying, maybe picking up a few words, but not really understanding. Because I got into the school system there in Cortez, it was all English. And imagine this, my grandfather, his contemporaries, when they traveled around the reservation to go to trading posts and all of that, the trader, because they worked with many cultural groups, the Navajo, the Spanish, the Ute, and English people. So the trader had to be able to be fluent enough to carry out commerce. I saw once my grandfather go into one of these trading posts off the reservation, and I heard my grandfather and the trader start talking to each other, and they decided to play a game. They would talk to each other in one of the four languages. Yes, that's Ute. I could tell you Spanish, not familiar with Navajo, but learn later on. Oh, I understand. To have a relative who could speak four languages, and then to get to me, English. I wonder about that, but when this opportunity came to learn about my language, I've jumped at it. And so I'm busy learning, because it is important to maintain and at least try and teach the young ones. The box is also important because where's the town? Does it say Greeley's on there anywhere? Greeley. There's an important tie to the Park Service, because that's where we used to go and get our uniforms. This is a box that my father, when he was a park ranger seasonal, I'm second generation, he had to order his uniform, and they had a uniform cash area, and they mailed this down to Toyac. And that hat that you see there, that Park Service hat, that's a Stetson flat hat. That is as straight as the first day he put it on his head in 1971. I wore this when I was in Yellowstone, because in the backcountry of Yellowstone, image is very important with the National Park Service, and you do not wear a ball cap at that time in 1988. You wear your flat hat. This felt Stetson. It fell into Yellowstone River. I had to go and swim and capture it. I shook it off. It never wavered. But as you go into Park Service now and visit the rangers there, watch the humidity come up, watch a little bit of rain, and you got waves. Man, that flat hat is. And that told me there is strength and quality. And that's why I decided to show this today, because my two worlds, my three worlds, I come from two tribes, the Ute and the Green and Gray. Gregory's. Contracts now are much different and everything, ordering, and oh my goodness, this was back in 1970. What you're seeing here is the flag of my reservation, my tribe, the Ute Mountain Ute tribe. The image, I believe, is of Chief Jack House, and then some of the other images that make up things that are important to our tribe. The color yellow, that's something we really like in our direction. The Southern Ute tribe, when you look at that image, again, oil, agriculture, other things, but one of the things unique when you put up all tribal flags within the United States, this flag is unique for the fact that if you look just below, I believe it's the peace pipe, above the letters at the bottom, do you see the state of Colorado flag in there? The Southern Utes, when the Indian Reorganization Act, I believe, came in the 1930s, they grasped at the opportunity to move forward in their progress of becoming more like the rest of us out here. Because their reservation is what they call checkerboard. My reservation, where I come from, it's one solid unit, one reservation. There are no checkerboards, private land, and anything amongst that, because we, in the discussions when they came and talked to us and the Southern Utes, our Chief Ignacio, he did not want to give up any more land. The heck with this. I'm just going to take my people. He did. He took up, went out of the meeting, and went west. And the agents and all that, well, what's going on? Hey, that's Chief Ignacio's people. They don't want to participate. It's their right. They go on. Over here in Southern Ute, they decide to take the allotments and all of this other stuff and get it divided up. And then some of those individuals either had their land swindled from them or they actually sold it. And all of a sudden you got all this checkerboard stuff that's going on right up to hit the southern, the Ute Mountain Ute Reservation, and it becomes a big solid piece all the way through. If I were to go to the Southern Ute Reservation, I'd have to go through gates, fences, get permission from private property owners who are not tribal members. I'd have to get permission from a tribal member who maybe has an allotment. And so that would be a way to exist all the way from, I think it's Hesperus to Pagosa Springs. You go west of Pagosa Springs on Ute land. I just get out of the house there in Toyac, get on my horse. I can just follow all the trails just south of Mesa Verde National Park, head down into New Mexico a little bit and come back all the way home to the Ute Mountain, and I wouldn't have to worry about crossing a fence line. So different strategies. The Northern Utes, I'm not that familiar with them. So I don't understand or can't speak to them, but certainly understanding allotment lands, reservation land, and exclusive jurisdiction or reservation, what they call trust lands that come into play. So when you see a Ute, depends where they come from and how they understand their responsibility to the tribe and to the land that they're responsible for, or that the tribe takes care of that. Again, the Northern Utes, color white. Eagle, very important. I can't speak too much to them because I haven't spent really that much time. Once I left high school, I actually ended up going to Europe for a summer. And I had a chance to be there and look back to America and look back to my reservation. And what happened was, while in Europe, the Europeans in the various countries would see this face, they'd see this color. And I don't think I quite matched with yours or yours. And we would have African Americans, the group that I was traveling with, and Americans that would be there. But when the Europeans saw me, they knew there was somebody there. So they asked me. Sometimes they unknowingly, and they're learning. We're always learning. They go like this to me. What are you doing? They were wondering why I didn't have braids. Oh, wow, that's a little bit different. And then I come to learn later on, Germany has Indian clubs. They dress up in the regalia. They have buckskin leggings, and during the summertime, oh my, they have no cover. And they're wandering around national parks and everything else, and I see them, and they come and see me, and they definitely want to know who I am, and they want to share their admiration of our cultures, and they show it with all their stuff. And again, they're from another part of the world. They have a different view, and I've come to learn that we always must take time to pause and look at what is happening around you and see if there's a way we can find a common point, a way to understand each other. Because certainly in the past, we have had some things that we've not agreed upon. Those three worlds. Here's a little thing that's important. What is it that sets American Indians apart from all other minorities in the United States? Yes, we are a minority, but what sets us apart? We live on lands with clearly defined boundaries and borders. They're reservations. And we are the only group to have active treaties signed between themselves and the United States government. We as a people have treaties. And what are treaties? If you look at the Constitution, they are the law of the land. So we sit up at that level. Sometimes in various meetings over various resource issues or conflicts, my American citizen will get up and say, well, they're just like us. Yes, we are to a certain degree, but we also have treaties that impact us in where we go forward. So I just want to remind you that because sometimes when we look at issues and we look at tribes, we may not understand why they still are on their reservations or why they won't do certain things, or they explain in a manner that we can't talk about private property in a logical manner as I live out here. Because on the reservation, I don't own the land. The federal government owns the land. I can have a home and I have a housing area that I can utilize, but the land itself, I don't own. It is owned by the federal government. Therefore, I can't go to a bank and get a loan for my home to improve upon it. It's got to come through other programs dealing with the federal government. We're out here, where I live also, I do own property. So I do know how to manage things like taxes, insurance, all these things that show up that we all are responsible for and being good neighbors. But on the reservations, it's different. We don't get a chance to learn that in our school system because that's just not things that they're focused on. So if we get out here, we have to figure out the things of rent, car payments, everything else that back home, it's really not a part of us learning. So there's a difference. Again, I mentioned that we are mentioned as sovereign nations in Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution. That separates us out from other minorities because we have this relationship with your elected representatives, the president, Congress. But that's changed a little bit because nowadays Congress has seen fit and decided to go in a manner where many tribes will have to deal with states because states encompass reservation lands. A good example would be Indian casino gambling. We can operate on the reservation, but in order for us to operate the reservation, the state is very concerned about citizens who are not tribal residents. Therefore, they want to be able to have some sort of legal jurisdiction and law enforcement to protect non-tribal members at that casino. So as we have casinos on our reservation, we had to agree that we had to give up some sovereignty to allow law enforcement to be able to come and deal with non-tribal members if any crimes or other things going on on that little piece of land around the casino. State officials don't have any jurisdiction going further into the reservation because that's all going to be Bureau of Indian Affairs and the tribal government. So again, imagine my reservation is pretty clear cut. We know where that, but imagine over at the Southern Ute Reservation where their casino is at, they have to be very careful. And so you got all these layers. You got the county, you got the state, you got tribal folks. And how can I explain that to somebody who comes in? This is a different way of looking at things. So there is some unique things that I think is important to just bring up and share. It's not that I want to separate us. I just want to say sometimes when things get confusing, we all have to step back in our own areas where we feel more comfortable with. And that's why I put this in here. The United States government negotiated these treaties with tribal leaders to establish legal title to the lands within the United States. So before the property that you purchase and own, title is very important. If you don't have a clear title, and there's all this other stuff, but in order to get the land to be able to sell it, that title had to be established. And that's why treaties come into play with these various tribal groups as we come across America. This is a map, and I'm sorry, it's a little hard to see, but you'll see different shades of color in there. And as you're looking at this, this was created by the Park Service, and it indicates where the various cultural tribes or the indigenous groups lived in the area. It goes from, I think, Texas all the way up into Montana. And if you look real closely in the center of that, you see a black little square in there. Does everybody see that? That's Rocky Mountain National Park. These are posted in places, but the Ute land is within there as well as the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Shoshone, and head north to Lakota and all of that. In my language class, we had to work on a project, or I was given an opportunity to work on a project of who we are and still explain that to the people. And this is the map that I came up with. And as you look at it, you'll see in the upper right-hand corner, it says Nooch. And everybody see the solid black line? It goes all the way around, and it looks like it goes up to another little black circle in that area. Well, that solid line is what we, and what I've learned through my research, would consider Ute homeland. The dash lines, as you see, as they go around on the outer, in maps, they used to call it the hunting grounds, but I call it our seasonal use areas, because we as Utes all were in constant movement because our home wasn't open or available year-round, so also too were the resources were not available year-round in one spot. So we needed a vast area to be able to exist. It occupies 5 states. And I don't know if you can see it, but real closely, you see these little darker line or really faint lines. When I put this map together, I said, I need to be able to show people a perspective from a Ute perspective. This is pre the states come into being. They are not there. They're yet to come. Therefore, I'm not going to focus that this is the state of Colorado. This is Ute land. This is where I come from. And it's huge. And so when I start talking to Ute kids or I start talking about Ute stuff, you know what I find remarkable that both of us can share? Have you guys ever looked at a map that has nothing but Park Service units in our region? Did you ever notice how many Park Service units sit between Utah, Colorado, Wyoming? And we have the most dense area of what America felt was incredible country to set aside for Americans, the public, the international visitors. Well, guess what? That's my homeland. So why, as a Ute, I can feel proud that the Americans, the National Park Service, the people who make this area so much to say it's beautiful. Go and visit. That's my home. So I spend as much time as I can before paying my entrance fee or showing my, was it now, senior pass and all of that. And I go and explore, because that's my home. And what I do nowadays, because I'm still using my language or learning my Ute language, what few words I learn, I go at the trailhead. I'll say those words to the forest, to the desert, to the mesas, the canyons, the mountains. You know why? My people have been here 23,000 years. Let's look at that. Imagine we go and lay out a rope or a tape, goes 23 feet. Each foot is 1,000 years. On one end of that rope is a coil. I remember I mentioned something about time immemorial. Well, that's the beginning of time, tribal people. And it's in a coil, in a spiral, because we still don't know how far back we go because we have yet to learn more about South America. But at least now with White Sands, we know that we go at least 23,000 years. We may not be the Utes, but we're the people. So imagine 22 feet of that is all indigenous, tribal people, people who've been living here. Let's get to the last foot, 23 feet. 6 inches is equivalent to 500 years. 3 inches is equivalent to 250 years. Inch and a half, 150 years. You are the new kids on the block from a Ute perspective. It's a good thing because you are now the stewards of this land. You've picked up the responsibility. Prior to that, the other 22 feet or 22,000 years, we lived with the megafauna. We lived with the short-faced bear. Anybody familiar with the short-faced bear? Guyagat, black bear, 4 to 6 feet at the shoulders. Grizzly bear, polar bear, brown bear, 8 to 10 feet at the shoulders. Short-faced bear, the Pleistocene period, 15 feet at the shoulders. When you're out there visiting America and all its wild lands, you guys ever remember those bear boxes? Put the food away and all of that? That's how we protect ourselves because we don't want the bears to get around. Think about food storage 10,000 years ago, 13,000. Probably when you have a short-faced bear who is leaner, faster, and taller and bigger. How did the tribal people live in that time? We had to be creative. Ute land, my homeland. You hear tribal people saying, oh, I miss home because of the boundaries and borders. They put us on reservations. When I got involved with the Park Service, I learned that this was all my homeland because I got a chance to hang out with the archaeologists, the geographers, all geologists that are in Park Service areas. And I got to learn some of this stuff. And then next thing you know, I'm in one of the most remote areas as a backcountry ranger in Yellowstone. Anybody ever hear of the Thoroughfare region in the southeast corner of Yellowstone National Park? From the trailhead to the furthest cabin is 32 miles one way. I was selected to spend a summer season there, and I was able to work with the rangers that taught me how to cut trail and get in there because my patrol area down in the southeast corner, 5 patrol cabins. So I had to move from cabin to cabin or I could stay. And we had to stock those up, but we also had to cut trail in. Remember all those trees, wintertime, things fall over? Well, you got huge ponderosa pines and Doug fir, and you gotta cut your way in, and then the summer season opens. But also at the same time, the grizzly bears, because the cutthroat trout there, they spawn in midsummer or early summer. So we're going down those trails and grizzlies at Cub Creek. They're at all the other creeks, and we are there with them. And again, remember I said Queagat, the Utes and the bear people? I used to sing bear dance songs as I go down my horseback when I was on my own at that time after they got me oriented. And I'd sing those songs up there in Yellowstone. And guess what? One time I was singing a bear dance song. I was going to a place called Pelican Valley, I believe it was. And I came into an open meadow, and right there, as I come on horseback, there was a sow and a cub, grizzly bear. They were there. And I was far enough away. I just said, I'll just keep going and head on over and go and sit on the other side of the meadow. And as a ranger, you got to do reports. You see things, you got to do a report. I saw a bear, I got to do a report. I got to call it in. We got a bear over here. And I'm way on the other side of the meadow. The bear's there. I look over every once in a while. I got my leg hooked over the saddle horn. I'm kind of relaxing, not really sitting in it, just sitting on top of it. And then I look over, and all of a sudden, I don't see the bear down, digging roots, and a little cub running around. I see the bear standing, and his arms are hanging down like this. And I'm like, okay. And it's over there. I don't go worry about it. And then I look away, look back, and all of a sudden I see this shoulders going like this. And I'm looking at the bear. I'm thinking it's going to go this way or it's going to go this way. But no, it's still, I'm only seeing this face and the bear, and it's coming to me. Somehow, something, I don't know what it was, Mama Bear didn't like us and wanted to come and see us. It comes all the way across that meadow. And so I've got to think, what am I going to do? I got paperwork, I got stuff in the saddlebags. I got to get my reins. I got my hand in the saddle horn. Oh, I got my flat hat. I got to bring it down here because it's my dad's and I don't want to lose this hat. And I take off. And I head to the other side of the meadow. The bear gets behind me and we are moving. And there's a point where I'm not opening it up and the grizzly is not closing it. And all I'm doing is praying that I don't fall off my horse. She eventually pulls away. Thank goodness. And after that, I thought, I better be more careful when I sing my bear dance songs. Because in the bear dance that we have, it's the women who select their male partners to dance with. And that was a mama grizzly. Maybe she heard that song and said, well, I'm going to take him up on it. So again, this thing of things in the three worlds meld together for me. It's just one of those things where things come together. It could have been a bad thing if the bear got a hold of me, and here we are in the tribal world and dealing with the bear, and the modern world said, hey, I'll do the report later, but I'm having to deal with that. I also was there during 1988, during the fires in Yellowstone, seeing fire at that level. And back then, we used terms as unprecedented. But because of the Marshall Fire and the fires in California and other fires recently, unprecedented is not the word they're using in among the wildland fire officials nowadays. What is it going to be? Because things are changing. But I had a chance to be out there as a Ute, bear dance songs in Yellowstone. But I learned recently the Utes were a feisty group. When the miners showed up in 1859, Tarryall Creek over there by Como on Highway 285, If you go out there, is it Bailey and Kenosha Pass, and you're heading towards, is it Buena Vista? Well, there's a little turn over there by Como where they had the rail station. Up that turn, you go up, there's Terriall Creek. That's where the miners found, prospectors found gold. And that's when it began. Ute and the miners are going to clash. 1859. The Utes didn't tolerate it. And if anybody owns private property, who comes onto your property and trespasses? You're going to want somebody to take care of that because they don't belong there. Well, what the Utes felt was that was their homeland. What are the miners doing here in a place that they didn't get permission? Well, they didn't live that long. Conflict. Down there towards Walsenburg was that place called La Vida or Spanish Peaks in that area. There's a beautiful valley. You get off the Highway 160 and go south and do that loop that goes up and around. There's a nice, beautiful valley in there, nice grass and everything else. You go into the local historical museum in there, and in there they have some papers that are kind of matted up at the bottom, but it's letters being sent to the government asking for help because the Utes are rubbing out, unliving the pioneers and the farmers in that area. That's because they were in an area that they were trespassing. The Utes didn't like that. They didn't give them permission. That western expansion, that pressure to push. There's even a story over there in Aspen that talks about when the first white man, went over Independence Pass in wintertime. He busted through all those snow drifts and got down there into Aspen where the Utes were living during the wintertime down there. And he was looking for minerals. Didn't have permission, but they were going everywhere. Up there near the town of Meeker. If you're familiar with Colorado history, remember the box Greeley, Nathan Meeker. Spent some time in Greeley. It's an ideal place, but he didn't get along. He was able to find an Indian agent job and end up over in the community that we know today as Meeker. Well, he had a different way of dealing with the Utes. He wanted to make them farmers. If you ever get a chance, go to Meeker and go up White River and go across eastward to the Flat Tops Wilderness, and there's a dirt road that goes even over a pass there and ends up down towards Granby. If you take that one drainage alone, you'll find that it's a beautiful place. That drainage alone has everything. Game, fruit, berries, root bulbs, onions, and all this other stuff that is all, the White River Utes were self-contained in that area. Well, when the Indian agency showed up there, the first Indian agent was actually looking to help the Utes maintain their homeland and deal with the boundaries that were set up for them, because they had to give up a certain extent, and they identified it. And at that time, the pioneers were coming on over, the people who wanted to settle, and they were coming onto Ute land. And the Indian agent at that time, prior to Meeker, was sending letters of support for the Utes saying, hey, the survey that the government has done, they're missing the property line. It's 17 miles south of the property line that should be established for the reservation. In fact, it's south of the town or our community of Meeker. And people are going into that area and they're trying to occupy, and the Utes are unhappy about this. Why? Because it's their land. They know it. They've already agreed to it in the treaties and understanding. Well, when Nathan Meeker gets there, he changes the whole thing to focus to make them farmers. He's not worried about the trespassing issues, but he gets really upset because the research I've done was that he was concerned because the Utes, we've always defended our homeland. We find ways, we take advantage of technologies. And at that time, Nathan Meeker was complaining because the Utes were leaving the reservation and they were going to the 4 trading posts that were in that area. And they were learning that the Utes had purchased over 10,000 rounds of ammo. And you know why they did that? Sand Creek, Washita, up in Nebraska, conflict coming, the military, the pressures that are coming, the conflicts occurs in Iraq. San Luis Valley, we deal with the Spaniards. All of the stuff is pushing on us. We're trying to find a way to negotiate and give and not fight. And that's why you don't hear any great battles. We talk about Meeker as a massacre. Those government agents and the employees for the government, they were well armed and they knew that that was coming. And what precipitated all of that was Nathan got pushed down out of his office to the ground and he sent a telegraph and the military came out of, it's over there by Rollins Fort, I can't remember. They came down. The Utes met him at a certain point and they went and talked to them and said, listen, we're more than willing to take your leaders down to see the agent, but the rest of you have got to stay here because this is our reservation. This is our homeland. Well, Thornburg, the leader, if he agreed to it, that's not what happened. They moved the military onto the land. Little did they know, the Utes were prepared for that because as you go down north heading towards Meeker, heading south, the hills come to a small, narrow area. Could be easily defended with a few warriors. But the Utes had come beyond that and they spread out on the smaller hills, on the bluffs, that they could oversee their homeland. And so when the military got in a low spot, that's when the Utes started to open fire on them. And that turned out to be the Milk Creek battle. I've been there and I've looked at it and go, oh my goodness, how easily this was for them to defend. The Utes were able to defend that. The military was definitely at a disadvantage. And plus they didn't know the land. The Utes know the land. And in that time, somebody went back down to Meeker, and that's where the incident, when the massacre occurred. And it's like, oh, this is all bad. But the Utes were well aware of other conflicts to the east. They were not going to be shorthanded and all this other stuff going on. Just before this incident occurs, you know who else is in that area that you wouldn't think too much about, but I'm chasing stories now? John Wesley Powell. If you go over to Meeker and they go to the museum there, they will talk about where the original or the agency was located when Nathan Meeker was the agent. They called that place Powell Park. And when I was going through and I said, what's Powell Park? And I go to the director and said, oh, well, that's John Wesley Powell. I'm going, what? He's all Colorado River, Green River, Grand Canyon. What's it? And turns out Powell was there with the Utes to learn from them and write down their information to capture that. And eventually he goes on to become the director of Bureau of Ethnology and all the stuff. And he has books and material that I have to go and chase because I want to know more about the Utes. I have to go to these people to find them. Ute homeland. Again, briefly, if you look at this real quickly, certainly you see the solid line. Can you guys make out the state of Colorado there? You guys see the green lines? What are the green lines? Over here, the Arkansas, the Rio Grande, the Colorado, the Platte. These are all the riverways that come to the headwaters or the mountains, the southern Rocky Mountains, our home, our home. We know it passionately because the Colorado River, where's its headwaters? We know it's just on the other side of Rocky Mountain National Park and it comes through. The Ute people are the people of the headwaters of the southern Rocky Mountains. That's where I come from. But nowadays, on my reservation in Southwest Colorado, we don't have one running stream continuously on my reservation. We have no water. How can we go from this to where we are at today? We do receive, because of the Dolores Water Project and the Animas La Plata Water Project, there was water coming to our reservation, but there's still Ben Nighthorse or Lake Lake Nighthorse Campbell reservoir, I should say, south of Durango that was built so that the Utes could get their water rights and get water onto our reservation. Well, we don't have the money, and the federal government hasn't given us, seen fit to give us enough money to get that project going to get us our water. A few years ago, when I was out working for the Park Service and doing other things, my relatives contacted me and said, "Hey, Don, we were just informed by the people who were responsible for the water in the Dolores, Montezuma County area that we have to live with only 7% of the water that we normally receive. A year after that, we're only going to receive 10% of the water. Yet you go up above the reservation line, you got all the farmers, dryland farmers for a long, long generations. They all turned to be alfalfa farmers. That's a cash product. And they had canals, pipes, water. A place that I knew was brown and sagebrush and piney juniper. Fields were cleared and all this green from the alfalfa. And I thought, how did we not get all the water that we need? Because all those water projects would have not gone forward and approved by Congress if the Ute tribes were not there. So we've always tried to work with our neighbors. And sometimes, like I said, we don't have a continuous water stream going through our reservation, yet this is where I come from. So history, for me, as I talk about it, I have to share that amongst tribal people. Hopefully they understand. But we are all still focused on living on boundaries and borders. I don't, because this is my homeland. So I'm very happy to share it with you and tell you some of the things I know, how far I think I go back. Again, about the prospectors in 1859, mining. If you guys are looking for anything out there, and again, it's being recorded, this is a good book to study Ute history. It has a lot of the technical material, and it was put together by Northern Utes at the time. I think it was in the 1950s and 60s. I've just gotten a hold of a copy of this, and I'm reading through it, and there's more things to chase. Again, you'll be able to pick that up. And in 1974, the Southern Ute Tribal Council passed a resolution to focus on preserving our language. The other two Ute tribes later started their efforts. And again, 3 Ute tribes approach things much different. It's interesting that it's sort of like accents. You know, there's different accents. Somebody from California as opposed to somebody from New Orleans, as opposed to somebody from Boston accents. It's all English. This is an effort, I don't know how far back, so of putting some kind of material, written material, so we could have books. It's moved forward. You can't see this too much, but there are 3 books here. One is the Ute Dictionary, one is called the Ute Text, and the other one is called Ute Grammar. These were the first efforts after 1974 to start to put material together, and came up with these. In 2000, the Southern Utes again did a revised edition, and this is the book that shows up then. Think about 1974 to the 2000s. They're still trying to figure this out. Nowadays, you can get on Amazon, and you can go and I only had 2 of the books. I couldn't find my third one dealing with grammar, but the Ute Dictionary, Ute Text, and the Ute Grammar is available for anybody who wants to learn Ute, and you can purchase it on Amazon. So it's like we have moved forward. And the other thing too, this is produced and owned the copyright by the Southern Ute tribe. That is a major step for tribes to be able to say, we own our words, we own ourselves, we own it. That has not, we've always had people write things and do things. They worked with linguists. My tribes worked with linguists, the Northern Utes, and they are all different linguists from different areas, so there's different ways of approaching this. But the Southern Utes is the way I learned it. So I'm using this material nowadays. This is just one of the coloring books that is produced by the Southern Ute tribe for their children. Ah, remember, I think I was talking to somebody. I got to be careful when I say things because some things can come back much later. What I'm showing you here is a book written by Nancy Wood, who received a state of Colorado grant to be able to go out into the rural areas of Colorado and capture stories. She happened to work her way down to the Southern Ute Reservation, the Ute Mountain Ute Reservation. And oddly enough, I crossed paths with her when I was just in my senior year in high school. So I am in this book. And she jumped in my pickup truck. My sister and I, we went on to the reservation in Mesa Top, and we're out there doing things and showing her and just talking. And she captured one of my stories that I decided to speak about. And that was 1977. The second book, called Dancing Voices, is a compilation, or I'm sorry, a gathering of phrases, words, statements by many tribal leaders in America. Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, Black Kettle, other people are in this. And I received this in 1995. And in it, it says, if people ask me if I'd rather see the Eiffel Tower or a rabbit, I'd pick the rabbit. Man can learn to build the Eiffel Tower, but he can't learn what a rabbit's feelings are unless he lives with him day in and day out. That's what Grandpa says. The rabbit's ancestors tell him what it was like, and so he knows what we don't know. He'll share if we ask, but here we are hurrying away. I said that in 1977. Somebody out there who was putting this book, Dancing Voices, together was going through all the material, and they had come across this when the buffaloes free the mountain and saw a little excerpt of me talking, and they decided to put it in there. Hopefully, you guys have learned a few things. Hopefully, I've shared some good things. If not, let's talk about it because I may not understand your perspective, but I certainly want to continue to find commonality. And it's because of my two worlds and my world. My green and gray tribe, my Ute tribe, that is whom I am, and that's my perspective. And thank you for taking the time to come out on a cold night to listen to my words.
All right. I think we're ready for questions. Um, so I'll just remind folks, I will, in-person attendees, just raise your hand. I'll come to you with the mic. Just please wait for me to get to you with the mic before you speak your question. Otherwise, we might have to repeat it. And then online friends, as a reminder, you could just put your questions in the chat. Yeah, so who's got a question?
Hi. Can you tell us something in your language?
You mean like, oh, let's do it like this. Because of the language, my own language I'm learning, you come to find out that our language is living. I don't know, I can't quite show it, but that water bottle, in it is water. We call it Ba, P-A-A, Ba, Ba. And come to find out, Ba goes south with other tribes. So it's an old word, Ba. Ba. Now let's think of a horse. A horse is a recent arrival because of the Spanish. Our language didn't have horse in the old words. But as we listen to the Spaniards, what did they call their horses? Caballo? Caballo. We listened to that and we ended up calling horses gava. Gava. Real simple, but we adapt. We hear things and we make it our own. A stick of butter. Butter. That's not in my old Ute world, but it's modern day. We call it pata. Pata. Pata instead of butter. And then there are times when not all the Utes, because we had a vast area, as you guys saw. I had a Cheyenne friend tell me one time, Don, you guys were not just a tribe. I said, so we were a confederacy? 13 bands across Colorado and Utah that we know today. 13 bands, and now we're down to like 3. He said, no, Don, think of yourselves as an empire, because we could not spend our time in the high mountains in altitude. We had a vertical migration. We lived in the lower areas, and then what happened is spring comes up, the wild onions, the roots are in the ground, in the soil much lower. And then as the snow melts and things warm up, other plants become available. Three-leaf sumac. They're red berries. Oh, sour like lemonade. And oh my God. And then other plants show up. And eventually you get to the high mountains, you're dealing now with wild strawberries, raspberries, and the onions show up. Yeah, now we're taking the flowered plants, the flowers, instead of eating the root bulbs, which we had in the lower valley. And then all of a sudden, solstice, summer solstice goes by, and the sun less and less, but other plants mature. So now we're heading down. Buffalo berries, pinyon nuts. We should supplement it with fish, deer. We had a vertical migration. And we understood that we couldn't stay in one spot because the plants wouldn't be there all the time. So we were not savages. We were in tune with the cycles of nature and of the plants. We had that knowledge. When they put us on reservations, we could not go back for the longest time. You can't leave the reservation. It was only when I got a wilderness ranger volunteer position with the Forest Service, I got into this Wiminiche wilderness and saw the strawberries, the raspberries, the onions at the highest elevations. And I go, oh my God, they robbed me. But I know I got to take the young ones if I could still get up there. Hybrid words or changing words with new terms. I'm trying to encourage the youth leaders. We need to come up with words dealing with atmospheric rain or atmospheric river, other terms that are out there to let people know that we are a living language. Not going to be easy, but those are some of the examples that I try and work on. Anybody have an iPhone? If they do, you can download the Ute Dictionary. Technology. Ooh, for arrow. Again, there's a whole bunch of words they put in here, and my tribe went to deal with an app. The Southern Utes went to the part of very formal with that textbook and all of that. The Northern Utes have a different way of dealing with things, and I'm going to go and learn that. So 3 different ways, and again, 3 different ways to spell the word apple, because each one are not following each other. They're that independent. So as a Ute language instructor, I've got to learn all 3 because I'm going to teach all these kids and show them that we are versatile.
Okay, a question from online. How is it that the federal government owns the land of the reservations? How come, whoops, sorry, the chat just moved. Give me 1 second. How come the tribal government doesn't own it? Is that different for different reservations and tribes? Who owns the minerals and resources?
We are what they call wards of the government. We're given a place to live. The management of the resources in most places are done by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. They work with the tribal councils in the development of and care of revenue that comes from that. But we've learned over the years that our own federal government has mismanaged some things. There's an individual named Cobell, Eloise Cobell. She was a person who worked for the Bureau of Indian Affairs up on the Blackfeet Reservation. She saw some things that didn't seem right, and she started asking questions. And it turns out that much of the revenue from our energy resources was not being properly accounted for. And it went into the billions. The federal government, with the court cases, were able to work with the tribal lawyers and said, this is what we're going to give you. And tribes have no way to make them more accountable. And they took what was given by the federal government. The Black Hills, there's an account for the Lakota people that's sitting there growing because the Black Hills were stolen, clearly in the federal cases that have come out about it. And the Lakota people, even though they were told by the federal government, we have an account for you to compensate you because we've wronged you, we'll pay you money for the land that we've taken and we've stolen. And the Lakota people said, no, we don't want the money. We want the land. How far will that go on? It hasn't stopped. And you were to talk to any Lakota person, they will never take the money. People who live on the reservation, again, we have no property of the land. The federal government does. And that's because of the treaties that were set up. And those were determined by important court cases during the period when John Marshall was the Supreme Court Justice back in the 1800s. And that's really way complicated that I could not address, but I know that it limits us in many things. Imagine if I wanted to put a distillery for alcohol on my reservation. Alcohol is prohibited. I don't have free business practices that I can carry out there. I have to go through a whole different system, and I've got to meet those standards. We're out here, if you want to set up a brewery, you just got to know how to figure it out, and you can get it done and meet all the requirements. It's not even allowed. But I'm not going to, alcohol is not my way. The land is my way. So.
This may be out in left field a little bit, but all the parks you've worked in, or most of them, have rock art. And I've always wondered if there is a correlation or if anybody's ever studied the figurines that have what appear to be regalia. And I'll use the jingle dress as an example. There's one up in Wyoming, and it's a figure of a woman, and I swear it's a jingle dress. And if you go to a powwow, you have jingle dress dances in different tribes. Has anybody ever looked at the correlation and how far back some of the regalia go? Does it go all the way back to the rock art eras?
That's a great question because I believe some tribes, some scientists are looking at this, but they still don't have an answer. But let me share you on a little secret that I've come to learn in my time in national parks, Indian land, Forest Service, be up public lands, let's just say it that. To the south, are a few of you familiar with solstice markers? Fajada Butte up there in Chaco has a great marker that we can't get to, but there's enough research done on that to deal with these spirals. Hovenweep has a spot like that. I don't doubt other places on my reservation, there might be other spots like that. But then you go further south, spirals are an important thing. Wall alignments are an important thing because the ancestral Puebloan people and other people further south that build structures, they watched the cosmos. They knew that they could build a building in a certain spot, go over the hill without line of sight, and they could align that next building with a certain rising of a moon or the sun without ever seeing it. Chaco, that's just incredible. There are other places around in the Southwest, but guess what? You go to the north, what is the one big thing in the Bighorn Mountains that sits up there that is noticed or is advertised? Medicine wheel. Guess what? Talking with tribal people, we have a medicine wheel close by here. You go into Canada, we have medicine wheels up there. Guess what? The people in their own geography, there's a transition period that's right through here. To the south, we got solstice markers. To the north, we got medicine wheels. What has gone on in here where the Utes are at? I've talked to some people, I've done some research, I still haven't figured it out. But those are the little things that I've learned by working in Park Service areas, because I would go and read reports. I got to the point where I could go in a national park, say Death Valley. I could go walking across a certain place and I just start looking and I go, oh, let me do a bit more walking around. A good telltale sign is all of a sudden you got a rebar, metal rebar stuck in the ground. The archaeologists have already been there. They've already done it. So it's like, oh, great. I'll just take the site number. I'll go back to the offices. And at that time, I'm a Park Service employee, federal law enforcement officer. I can look at the report. And that report confirms what I was seeing there. I got so good. I still today can go out and look at things. I go, oh, man. When I got to the boundary waters, taking a Southwest semi-arid tribal member and put them in 10,000 lakes and give them a canoe, I had to learn. One of the important rules I learned was keep 3 points of contact at all times. Anybody in the Navy, anybody in the boundary waters range, they all know it. I get up there, I have no idea. But then I know where to go find seeps and springs if we're in danger to find those water sources. And that's what happened when we were running short of water. My relatives said, hey, Don, we know you've walked all over our reservation. Is there any place where you might find a water source? I said, sadly, no, there's no place.
Question from online. Now that the Ute language is being taught in the public schools, do more families on the reservation try to speak both Ute and English at home?
Well, certainly English is the primary language nowadays because of the school systems that are there. Trying to get the Ute language among the kids in the public school system within the state of Colorado, we're still trying to find those positive opportunities with the schools local to our reservation, Ignacio, Cortez. But along with that, you have to try and make sure that these individuals are properly compensated. And also, they have to be able to feel like they can freely speak their language, and they have to be mindful of some things probably within learning that language. And the other thing too, the children have got to be shown that it is of value. And this is where we're so English oriented, and with all our technology, there's no avenue for the Ute language to come about. I'm an elder and I'm chasing it because I'm retired. I got time. I can go explore. But for a child, they have academic qualifications they got to maintain. And in any school system, oh my goodness, well, I remember a time when my parents would take me away from the school, and the teachers would give me the lessons to my parents, and we'd go up to a ranch up near Gunnison, and I'd spend the month of September being a cowboy, riding horses and chasing cows and all of that, but I still had to get my lessons done. Nowadays, there are snow days and there are other emergencies. You can't miss a certain amount of time. It's a short amount. I couldn't do that nowadays in a school system, be gone a month. There's just no way. And imagine the Ute language. There are only 30 fluent speakers. They're all probably a little bit older than me. There's some younger ones. They got families to take care of. It becomes much harder. So all we can do is try.
So you said about Indians, how they're different than other minorities. Do you think that one thing that makes them different is to me, it seems like they try to get along. They have a philosophy of land and nature and ancestors. Do you think that makes the minority of Indians different? Is their gentleness, and they do try to get along?
I would say yes. The Mayflower, Plymouth, Jamestown, St. Augustine, all the things to the west, to the east. Zuni, the Rio Grande Pueblos. When they met the newcomers, the Spaniards, the English, the Americans, the Russians, we've always, from what I understand, shared what we knew. But that doesn't mean that we were not just giving things away. We wanted to establish a point of respect and understanding, and learning that we're going to live on this land together. But the newcomers have their own ideas and own practices and ways of doing things that didn't quite fit with how we saw the world. And so with that comes conflict, competition, and devastation. But guess what? Things are changing. Buffalo restoration, bison. For some reason, people are seeing that it's important. Salmon restoration, those dams in the Pacific Northwest, California, the minute those dams were taken out, who showed up? The fish. Wildland fire. Stephen Pine, a fire ecologist in the 80s, was talking about you should listen to the tribes and get their understanding on that. Well, that's happening in California. Prescribed burns on the small little rancheros or reservations and all of that, they are picking that up and starting to carry that knowledge. Guess what? There's a person by the name of Omar Stewart. He used to teach here at the University of Colorado Boulder. He wrote a book called Forgotten Fires. Actually, it was a different name, but the people who compile it, because he wrote a manuscript, he tried to publish it in the 50s, and he wrote it in a style that was dealing from a tribal perspective. Nobody had any interest in that because fire ecologists, anthropologists, they didn't talk in that manner. So he went back, did more work, tried to publish it again a second time. It just didn't work because the grammar was not right at the time period for that. He tried a third time. And finally, it got published. And in 2007, this book called Forgotten Fires shows up. And now the professionals, I would imagine, are taking time to look at what he had written about because he had taken time to stay among the tribal people and learn about fire. I've only come across this book a couple of weeks ago. And so now, again, there's so much going on. I have to read because there are other stories and other things that are happening. But there is the taproot of the people. When America came across, the Spaniards, the French, they clear-cut us. Genocide, termination, acculturation. They took us all the way down to the soil. But the one thing they didn't get was the tribal people's taproot that's in the soil. And now that we no longer have to worry about extermination, genocide, termination, we have self-determination now. That taproot is coming above the surface. And those tribal people are coming up with ingenious ways and creativity. Go to the March Powwow, the Denver March Powwow, and see those grand entries. See the regalia. See the drums. Listen to the strength, because that's that taproot that is now coming out. And we will, again, have an impact amongst all of us. I see it. I know it. I'll write about it. But I can see it from over here. So I can only be happy because I live in grand times when everything is chaos. It is. It's like, oh my God, why? And guess what? The tribes are humming along. They know.
All right. That feels like a good place to end. Thank you so much.
In the Ute way, it is good, is usually how we might end the conversation. We call it Tagoyak. 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 It is good. Tagoyak. 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 At least they turn a couple terms. Tagoyak. Anybody remember this one? Guyagat. Guyagat. You just remember that, the bear? And we Utes are the people of the headwaters of the Southern Rocky Mountains. I love it. Colorado. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Just a few quick things before we go. Once again, Mr. Whyte, thank you so much for making the drive up to join us this evening and sharing. I want to thank all of you for joining us and bringing your curiosity and your questions. I want to thank the Friends of the Library Foundation for supporting everything we do. Two quick notes. On Saturday afternoon, Dr. Rachel Gross, CU Denver Professor of History, will join us to talk about the history of the outdoor gear industry in Colorado. After the talk, we will have a pop-up museum. Bring a beloved piece of gear and tell us about it. Maybe you have a Frostline kit from like the 70s or something. Bring that over. Then on Monday evening, Dr. Michael Childers will tell the story of how Denver became the first and only city to bid for an Olympics and then reject it. How it happened, what the forces were at work there, and how they still resonate today. I'll send an email to everyone who registered with a quick survey. Fill it out. Let us know what you thought of tonight's program. And have a great evening, everyone.